So also a part of our group is Lejla, who is unfortunately sick and was not able to join us today here. We hope she gets better. The topic that we have been working for the last year now, not year, but 9 months actually. Can you just, thanks. It was involvement of interest groups in development of public policies in Bosnia and Herzegovina in the process of EU accession. As most of you know, our topic, as I'm sure all of your topics as well, have been very blended in together by the mixture of our individual topics that we initially proposed. This is what we ended up working with, and we try to make the most of it. So the policy problem in this particular topic, that as we have understood it and defined it, has been that interest groups are not adequately involved in the process of policy making in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So there are different reasons why this is the case, but we tried to address this issue by talking to the institutions and talking with the interest groups as well. So particularly, we were, considering how marginalized groups, civil society, youth, and business community are involved in the process of policy making in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and I'm sure in most of the countries of the region as well, policy making is largely driven by the public institutions who are mostly in control of all the stages. And this is often a very rigid mechanism where there are certain rules of procedure that everybody needs to follow, and then you end up with certain document that sometimes civil society has not seen until it gets published. But according to our framework, public institutions are obligated to consult the public, and there are even legal stipulations that would somehow insinuate that this approach should be a proactive one. But this framework is not the same across all the levels of government, which makes it inconsistent and sort of incomplete. And in that way, we try to figure out if there was a reason on how to work on this issue. You see, internal interest groups and external stakeholders, as I already said, are often completely left out of the process, not simply because they didn't want to, not even that it wasn't even the case that public institutions didn't want their feedback, but there was some glitch in the process, and we will try to see what it is. Okay, so in Bosnia and Herzegovina, as you all know, we have a decentralized political system, which makes interest groups fragmented and dispersed, which makes it difficult actually for them to organize their interests and then to pursue their goals towards the public authorities, and to in that way make influence in policy making. So this is also accompanied by the rigid consultation mechanism that also does not see differences between legal acts and all the documents that need to be that need to be consulted. So some documents that do not actually concern the public, at least at the state level, have to be made publicly available, which is sometimes just a formality, and is really not. There is nothing to be gained. On the other hand, countrywide approach to policy making is one of the 14 key priorities outlined by the European Commission in their opinion on Bosnia and Herzegovina's request for membership in the EU. This is also even more further propelled by the Sigma principles of PAR, which require inclusive and evidence-based approach to policy making. So both of these things actually resulted in the fact that one of the goals in Bosnia and Herzegovina's strategic framework on PAR is ensuring, as you can see, inclusive access and public involvement in the phase of creating, implementing, and monitoring strategic plans, public policies, and regulations. Um, Nevertheless, there is no actual data on how many of these consultations take place on the lower levels of government, but on the state level, Ministry of Justice actually produces reports, and it can be concluded, and they have concluded themselves, that the public consultation mechanism usually generates low response.
Our target groups are all institutions in Bosnia and Herzegovina that are involved in the process of public policies and non-governmental organization. The recommendation that is a result of our public policy is target to Ministry of Justice and to Council of Ministers in Bosnia and Herzegovina in order to create one document on governmental level. This document should be specific and unique so that all institutions and all interest groups that are involved in the process should be obliged to give feedback of these same processes. In our paper policy that we have done last year, we have researched specific interest groups. First of those interest groups were marginalized groups. At the beginning, I would like to point out that there is no clear definition what marginalized groups are. The definition depends on specific circumstances like working and living condition, early school leaving, accession to healthcare and education. So the definition of marginalized groups is variation from country to country. Why we first analyze marginalized groups is the reason because social politics is one of 11 priorities of cohesion policy in European Union, and as a result of our paper policy is that marginalized groups are not enough involved in this public policy process. The main reason for that is very bad and slow vertical and horizontal communication, but also insufficient process where should they take a place. The next group that we analyzed was civil society, as you can see. When we are talking about European Union, civil society takes a very important role in a source of giving information and uninformal education, but it's also very important as a control mechanism, especially in those situations that are very political sensitive. The main problem that we find out during this research last year is that public policies are not enough implemented in the practice, and we came to the conclusion that people, especially civil society, has been witnesses of not enough coordination between institution and the same civil society. In the end, we think that civil society is more affected with poor economic situation, but also with an unemployment. And as a result, we suggest that civil society should be more involved through harmonized actions and giving support to those activities that are the most affected in civil society.
Regarding the role of the youth as the third interest group that was in the focus of our policy paper, it is remarkable to point out that the key challenges of the young people are no access to quality career counseling services that would help young people to gain remarkable experience in career. The second key challenge is there is a limited access to career information. there is the lack of coordination and cooperation amongst key stakeholders that prevent young people to identify which support they can gain. And the last one is the quality of internship for young people is not guaranteed. Among young people aged from 15 to 30, only 1% participates in representative bodies. 5% of them participates in youth organization and only 6% in political parties. In global picture, or broader picture, we can find out that 13% of young people express the interest in politics and only 19% express the knowledge of politics. Youth issues at the national level are under the jurisdiction of the Commission for Coordination of Youth Issues in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and newly established the Section for Youth and Mobility amongst the Ministry of Civil Affairs. The last but not the least interest group that was in the focus of our policy paper was the business community. The main role of this community is to create an environment for the investors to Bosnia and Herzegovina. But it was pointed out by them that the main obstacles in Bosnia and Herzegovina for such investments are the political instability, the corruption, and the bureaucracy, the complicated bureaucracy that we have here. It was also pointed out by many general managers of representative companies in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and doing our research, I have to mention in Republic of Srpska and Unasana Canton, especially when talking with NGOs, the representatives of NGOs, it was pointed out that the main obstacle in Bosnia and Herzegovina to create such environment is the negative demographic trend of young people, meaning that young people and highly educated people are leaving Bosnia and Herzegovina and so-called the brain drain, creating the reduction in domestic market for such investors.
And in the end, I will present you with our recommendations of our policy paper. So the public institutions should be obliged to proactively seek feedback from interest groups whenever drafting legal acts, strategic documents, or other important documents by what we divided it to be in 3 phases. The first phase is the direct contact between public institutions and relevant interest groups, with the aim of receiving feedback in each phase of drafting legislation. Also, institutions have different incentives to interact and grant interest groups with access to political and policy in decision-making processes. Furthermore, lobbying across branches of government, what we include executive, judicial, and legislative. And in the end of the first recommendation is that institutions shape lobbying behavior, and there is significant variation in type of venues in which interest groups approach in order to exert political and policy influence. The second one would be to have one publicly available conference while drafting documents which concern the public to discuss and propose changes which would improve the open public consultation framework. The third and final one is the inclusion of 3 representatives in each working group whose draft documents concern the public, which would help to have the direct involvement of interest groups in the government bodies. Thank you all.